So excited for this, guys. Our guest today is a metabolic health specialist. She specializes in reversing chronic illness and optimizing our health. She is the co-founder of So and Arrow, which is an innovative health company that crafts and create delicious and nutrient dense food for individuals who believe that nutrition has the power to change their lives. She is also earned a couple of university degrees for anatomical science and physiotherapy. And to top it all off, she mastered in nutrition, physical activity, and public health. She also has written a book titled Primal, Living in a Modern World. Stick around because this book talks about amazing self-discoveries that we all want for ourselves. And she talked about the untapped potential that we all have within us, creating a badass body and a superhuman brain, and the choice is ours to make if we truly want it. I'm so excited for this. I'm here with Pauline Cox. Pauline, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, Lorenz. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, first of all, love your book. The easy to understand, the not overly complicated science, the recipes, and it has a nice touch of sense of humor, which I love. My biggest takeaway is from reading it is anyone who chooses to make a change can. The choice is really ours. I love it. You have dedicated this book to those people who want to do better, but maybe just can't follow through. And you've shown a great deal of compassion and empathy to everyone who wants to, but can't for their own reasons. Your journey seems like this is what you were destined to do, help people transition, find their health, and you made it your mission to build this community.
Yeah.
um, I would like to know more about your background a little bit. To just give a little backstory, food is always a good place to start.
Yeah.
I think growing up, absorbing our surroundings, we pick up on our parents' food habits or our environment, and everyone has a part in it in on how we found our passion. What would you say your food habits were like growing up leading to your passion?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Lorenz, because growing up, my food habits were super simple.
Mhm,
I grew up in a time where there was no snacking. It was all about you eat what you're given, fruit,
mhm.
vegetables, meat, very simple home cooked meals. And I had an appreciation for that as a child. I was hungry, so I ate.
Mhm,
I was not a fussy eater by any means. I think where things began to change actually was when I left home and went to university.
mhm.
And when you're given free reign to make your own choices, that's when things really started to change. And I would choose different foods, easier options, more fast foods, and
Mm.
things that would make life easier for me that were congruent with study and enjoying university life, drinking a bit
Yeah,
more, late
of
night
course.
eating, all the things that sort of go hand in hand with being a student of that age.
Mhm,
And then as I learned more about the body, I really figured that, this is not a sustainable way of living. My
mhm,
body was certainly telling me that at the time. So I started exploring. At the time, I'd graduated as a physiotherapist, and I started exploring different ways of eating, and actually entered a vegetarian journey of living. And so I'd cut out all red meat and fish, and I was eating a lot of grains and rye
mhm.
bread and pulses and lentils and dates. I was making a lot of power balls because I was really lacking in energy. I was tired all the time. And so I
Mhm.
was using these very sweet and dry fruits, telling myself they were very healthy for me, and really, convincing myself that I'd made the right choice. All the time I was becoming increasingly tired and lethargic. I was very anemic. I had
Mhm.
palpitations, I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, so I had all sorts of health issues going on. And yet, working as a health professional and believing that
Mm.
I was being healthy on my choices of food and the pathway I was on. So at that point, I started to really question the food choices I was making. And that was quite a pivotal point in going from where I was at that point to there must be a better way. There must be a different way of supporting and nourishing my body.
Now you've mastered in nutrition, but before that, you had worked in the physiotherapy space
Yes.
for 2 decades. You said 20 years, and what's interesting to me is you've found that most of the clients' problems are chronic. People will be coming back to you for the same uh, problems that they have, and it doesn't seem to be getting fixed. Now, talk
Yeah.
about those times when you've worked there for 20 years. What have you learned, and what have ultimately led you to decide to, okay, something's wrong.
Yeah.
I want to do more for these people. And what made you decide to go into nutrition?
That's a good question. I didn't spend that much time in physiotherapy. I
Mm,
started off my career in that environment, and I did
mm,
work for a number of years within that environment. And I came across time and time again patients with inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions, aches and pains that just weren't resolving with manual interventions. And then I came across the work of Dr. Terry Wall, and she is a medical doctor in America who has an autoimmune condition called MS. And
mm,
I became really interested in her work because she managed to reverse her condition, particularly the severity of her symptoms, from being in a recliner wheelchair to now cycling 18 miles a day. And it really intrigued me because as a physiotherapist, you taught that this is a progressively worsening condition
mm,
and that there's nothing diet wise that can be done about it.
mm,
It's all about halting the progression as opposed to reversing and improving. So coming across her work really inspired me. So I traveled over to America. I went to observe some of her lectures and realized that there's a great deal that can be done. And she used nutrition. She looked at the subcellular
mm,
areas within the body, so the mitochondria and how the mitochondria can impact our energy production. And it basically inspired me to go on and study for a master's in nutrition and and basically take a
mm.
different pathway,
Yeah.
change from being a physiotherapist to working with nutrition to reduce
Mm,
inflammation, to heal autoimmune conditions, and to ultimately get to the core of why
mm.
people were getting these aches, these pains, these inflammatory joints, as opposed to trying to take that approach from the outside,
Yeah.
which is what musculoskeletal approaches were doing at the time when I was working in that field.
How was MS looked at the time? What was the fix, or was there a fix? Because you're talking to me like she fixed a problem that was um looked at as something that cannot be fixed, but
Yes.
can be, you could do something for it to reduce, the
Yeah.
symptoms. But um how was MS looked at back then?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Lorenz, because when Dr. Terry Wolf first approached the medical community about her discoveries, because she was under the best neurological care, the best pharmaceutical care, the best physical therapy
Mm,
care, and nothing was halting her progression, which would be considered in
mm,
standard medical terms as fairly normal. You're not hugely surprised if things are progressing. It's sort of accepted.
mm,
However, she wouldn't accept it. She did not want to
mm,
accept this change in physical function, but knowing that cognitive function could possibly be the next thing to decline.
mm,
So she stopped working and she applied herself to studying the biochemistry of the cell. And it was through understanding the nutritional needs of these structures within the
mm,
cells, the subcellular structures, and how by really improving nutritional density
mm,
and giving the body what it needs, there
mm,
can be some reversal of these chronic illnesses, and particularly this autoimmune condition. So when she first released this information and sort of approached the MS Society and was saying, listen, look what I've done. It's possible. We can do something about this.
Mm-hmm.
She was told to stop being irresponsible and stop giving people hope, and that this isn't,
Wow.
she must not be saying these things. And she was a trailblazer. She ignored that and decided to push ahead with her message. And she now conducts research around this whole subject of nutrition and autoimmune conditions, particularly neurodegenerative conditions. And she's now hailed as a hero in that field, as opposed to someone who's shunned by the very society who now embrace her and see her as a bit of a hero.
Wow, that must have been a scary time for her, because she is putting her career on the line too for saying that. But the difference is she is her own test. She used her own self to conduct tests. So and she's getting all of these benefits, and you're saying that opened the door for you to explore even more.
Yes, it did. Well, it really inspired me. I thought, having really dived deep into the science regarding what she was saying, I recognized the power that providing the body with what it needs, removing things that are causing damage and inflammation, particularly around gut health, and healing and restoring gut function, restoring that very special enclosed environment that is the gut, healing leaky gut, and then really helping to restore and support the cells, the systems, and how those systems interact with one another. And it absolutely inspired me to start doing my own research around these areas, around how we can restore and optimize health of all the different systems in the body, and how those systems interact, and ultimately how they allow us to function at a much higher level. And not just those with autoimmune conditions or chronic illness, but those who sort of just struggle by with energy or just get by. When we start doing these really small changes, making these small improvements to diet and lifestyle, how synergistically they come together to make a really big difference from our day-to-day experience of life, energy, sleep, hormones, mood, mental well-being, cognitive function. They all start to improve as we become more conscious about what we're putting in our body and how that has an impact on our gut health as well as the rest of the body.
Wow, that's interesting, because knowing the source or the core of that problem and that opens the floodgates of what potential, the study of, this could be. So now entering into the nutrition space, and you have all of these questions that you want to be answered. Do you have a personal question that you want answered for yourself? Do you have, somebody that's close to you that is experiencing inflammation that you want answered, or is it for yourself, just wanting to learn more? And what's your going through your mind at that time, going into the nutrition space? What do you want answered?
I think at the time, because I was struggling myself, I felt exhausted. I wasn't sleeping well. I felt frustrated, Lorenz, because I felt like I'm being healthy. What's going on here? I don't really drink any alcohol. I eat well. I'm eating lots of grains and wholemeal. And, I thought I was being healthy. So for me, it's about shifting my paradigm and then recognizing that, wow, so few people, really live by these principles, especially back then. More and more people are aware now of the benefits of ketones for fuel and optimizing fat burning versus being a sugar burner, optimizing gut health for mental well-being, for cognitive function, for systemic inflammation. These are terms that are much more well understood and known about now, but back then it was very alien. No one was talking about gluten and leaky gut or about sugar burners, and we were still in that paradigm of we must have our wholemeal carbs and we must have our brown bread and brown pastas every day. and it certainly wasn't working for me.
Mm,
So that desire came from making myself feel better and getting back to who I felt I'd lost. But then also being in the health space, recognizing that, wow, there are so many people that can
mm,
be helped through understanding this particular field of science
mm,
better. So leaving the field of physiotherapy and entering a field where I felt I could get more to the root cause of disease and
mm,
inflammation and inflammatory driven diseases was a very exciting step
mm.
and journey on my sort of progress and pathway to health and well-being.
Now, you've talked about keto and getting into the nutrition and how it works. Back then, do you think that we're making any progress in terms of just educating the public, the general public? Now, this is outside of keto space. If you're outside of the keto space, and obviously we know that keto is a great weight loss tool. Everyone knows that it's universally known to be a weight loss tool, and um, if you don't have to be in a keto space to know that, because that's the ultimate goal. But I'm not saying we shouldn't promote weight loss, right?
Yeah.
But it's just not being received as healthy by the general public because everyone creates their own assumptions, of course. What else do you think about keto isn't talked about enough? Because losing fat
Yeah.
is great, but the argument is it's an unhealthy way to lose weight. Should the keto collective, everyone in the keto space, divert it from weight loss to other benefits of keto? And if
Mm.
so, what discussion should we be having so we can change the argument?
I love that question, Lorenz, because I think there is a great deal of emphasis on weight
Mm,
loss, and yes, it's a really great tool for weight loss. However, and here's the caveat, we're not just interested in weight loss. We're interested in gaining health. And just because you're losing weight, it doesn't always mean you're gaining health. You can lose
mm,
weight by going on a cabbage soup diet, but it doesn't mean you're going to gain in health. So we really want to be looking at the benefits of creating a lifestyle that's sustainable, it's appropriate for that particular individual, it's enjoyable, it creates curiosity, it creates a healthy relationship with food. And really, the outcome is stable blood sugars, reduced systemic inflammation, improved cognitive function, improved
mm,
energy, improved sleep, a great relationship with yourself as well as with your food and those around you. So it's about seeing these markers of health as measuring tools as opposed to just weight.
mm,
Because, keto in itself is just a metabolic state. Ketosis is a metabolic state that we go in and out of as we fast or as we're eating foods that support that metabolic state. And what we don't want to do is manipulate the body into that state at all costs. It
mm,
should be around choosing healthy fats that are going to support the body but not drive systemic inflammation, which, as you know, some fats are not healthy at all. And we don't want to just be putting any fats on our plate. Also, it's about looking at, well, who is this individual and what's their journey been so far?
mm,
If they've had a very heavy carb diet, if they have significant weight that they're looking to lose, if their liver is quite fatty, then you don't want to take that individual and start loading their plate up with lots of saturated fat.
mm,
It's a journey that they go on to start to understand that, starting with some intermittent fasting, increasing your fermented foods, reducing and removing some of those unhealthy fats, focusing on the foods that are rich in healthy fats as opposed to supplementing lots of extra fat on your plate, encouraging the body to burn its own fat. So it really is about creating this step-by-step process and this journey and looking at that individual as
mm,
an individual as opposed to one
mm.
size fits all, and eating in a certain way at all costs in order to lose weight.
I love that because everything that you talked about is packaged well in your book, and it's very well described with the science that is not overly complicated, and it's basically easy for the general public to to absorb, because who suffers from inflammation? Mostly the general public, right? Because the general public is the target of these big companies that directly or indirectly cause this epidemic. I just wish that we could really um, reach more people, not just the keto space, but just
Yes.
mainstream. Like, because what keto is for the mainstream is keto weight loss. And there's a lot of books out there for keto for just weight loss and not explaining what's really going on in your body. And so the general public really has no choice but to make their own assumption. Oh, why are you losing so much weight? This
Yeah.
can't be healthy, right?
You know what, Lorenz, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I completely agree. It's when people start to recognize the benefits of ketones for brain function, for example, for the insulin resistant brain, for the aging brain, for the brain that has some neurodegeneration. You know, ketones are the preferred source of fuel for the heart and the brain. And the brain will pull ketones in to use it, as opposed to glucose, which is more of an on-demand glucose is more of an on-demand fuel for the brain. So if the brain is in this hypometabolic state, i.e. it's a bit sluggish and it's a bit insulin resistant, then the brain cells are not getting the fuel. Whereas when we have ketones circulating in the body, those ketones get across into the blood-brain barrier and they will just get into those neurons regardless of whether they're being demanded or not. And so all of a sudden, when you're getting ketones for fuel, whether you're supplementing them through MCT oil or exogenous ketone powders, or whether you're burning your own fat for fuel and getting these ketone levels, your baseline ketone levels increased, then you find that the brain becomes more alert, your memory can improve, your cognitive function. There's a fantastic book by Dr. Mary Newport that documents her husband's Alzheimer's. He had an early onset form of dementia that she really became passionate about using ketones to improve his brain function and his experience with this neurodegenerative situation. And, you know, ketones have the power to be able to support good brain function, to support the other systems, because they're highly anti-inflammatory, they act as a potent antioxidant, they are a preferred source of fuel over glucose. So we have this amazing body that has this ability to burn two sources of fuel, glucose and ketones. And you're right when you say that keto tends to be labeled as a weight loss tool in a certain space, whereas actually if we looked at ketosis as being a form of optimizing brain function and cardiac function and body composition, then, you know, we have a tool that we can all access through just changing certain elements of the way we eat, what we eat and when we eat. And that alone will start to increase our ketone levels.
Love that. I'd like to get into the body's process of choosing the fuel source. When both carbs and fat is present in the body, well, almost always fat, right, is always present. So as we all know, our body always choose carbs over fat when carbs is present. Do we know why, and why can't our bodies choose fat where there is too much of fat in the body?
That's a really good and really interesting question, and there's a few reasons around this. So firstly, let's put the brain aside, because the brain will actually choose ketones over glucose if ketones are present. The rest of the body, the glucose is not the preferred source, but it will always choose glucose over burning fat, as you rightly pointed out. And the belief is it's because glucose is toxic to the body. High blood sugars are toxic, and the body needs to get rid of the blood sugars. So it will try and use up those glucose, that blood sugar, through, you know, transporting it to the cells via the insulin receptors, and then any excess will be stored as fat. Now, insulin is it blocks fat burning, and in the UK, it's been estimated that up to 60% of individuals are insulin resistant. So if you have a state of insulin resistance, generally your blood sugars are going to creep up really easily. Your insulin levels are going to be higher because your body's trying to get this blood glucose out through increasing insulin levels. And so it blocks fat burning. So through fasting and making different food choices, we can start to improve insulin sensitivity, reverse insulin resistance, access our fat burning, and then start to burn off some of this stored fat that we have on our body.
Your book, you started with this understanding the whole forms of fuel the body uses for energy, right? I love that you started it with this. What is the importance of understanding this first? Understanding this bit, I think helps people understand how fasting also works, so people don't think people are just starving themselves. But why is it important to start with like the fuel source and just understanding it?
Yes. I personally think if we start to understand our bodies better, we can really understand how to work best with them. It's kind of like being in charge of a car. When you understand your car, you can work better with it. You know what fuel to give it. You know that, for example, our bodies are like a car that has 2 tanks of fuel. We have this immediate source of fuel, which is our glucose, and it's stored as glycogen. And once we use that up, in theory, we have a whole store of fuel, i.e. our body fat, that we can access. But if we don't know how to access that fuel, then we're constantly topping up. We're stopping our journey every 10 miles to top up with glucose in order to get to where we need to get to, versus going, a whole 300, 400 miles on this reserve source of fuel that we have that's our body fat. And if we start to understand that we're dual fuel burners, we can access both these sources of fuel. One is more of an emergency source of fuel. The other is sustaining. It stops our blood sugars going up and down. It keeps us satiated. It's really beneficial for our health because it doesn't produce as much free radicals. It's a more efficient source of fuel. When we start understanding the concept of fat for fuel, and fat's not dangerous and fat's not going to kill us, that's when we can stop making it the enemy and vilifying it, and actually start to embrace the idea of being a fat burner over a sugar burner.
How important is dietary fat? Now, I understand that we have fat stores in our body, right? And people outside of keto think that we have to consume fat, 70% of fat, the macro in the ketogenic diet. Do we have to eat dietary fat, or can we get away with just protein?
It depends on how much fat you have to burn. I work with ultra marathon runners. I work with individuals with chronic health issues that really do need to look at improving their body composition. So if you are an ultra marathon runner and you're predominantly focused on improving your longevity in terms of the distances you can go and not using these kind of glucose patches and whatnot, then you need to make sure you're getting plenty of dietary fat to provide your body with the calories to go the distance. Now, if you have more body fat to burn, you don't need to be loading up on quite as much additional dietary fat. It's important to look at the types of fat and the individual. I personally believe that women tend to not eat enough protein. And again, that might be something to highlight with the keto diet. It's predominantly seen as a really high fat diet. My approach is much more about quality protein, some healthy fats, plenty of fermented foods, and then colorful vegetables. So I see ketosis as a metabolic state my body goes into in those windows when I'm not eating, and from the beneficial fats I'll have to support my body. But I don't load up my plate with fat. I'm in my 40s. I like to think about my hormone balance, my liver function. And for that, I like fiber-rich, colorful vegetables. I like quality protein to support my muscles and my skin, my hair, my nails, my neurotransmitters, all the things we need amino acids for. And then the fermented foods for really optimizing gut health.
And it's important to understand that part of this lifestyle, because you have to know the truth about the lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
And another thing that we have to talk about is finally transitioning into this lifestyle, which is a different story. Of
yeah,
course, there's a lot of mindset that is involved, because you are basically, um, if you're from a standard American diet way of lifestyle, then this is totally different from what you've known, right? So you've
yeah,
known, you've educated yourself, you know what it is, but um, getting into it is a totally different story, because the diet culture, right? I want to talk about the diet culture. It thrives on short term success, right? Quote unquote diet, the 30 days this and the 60 days that, but it's never about changing our lifestyle completely. So anybody that's going into keto is looking to try it, right? It's not looking to, they're not looking to change their lifestyle completely, but
yes,
just so happens that when they get in on it and they followed it the right way, they see these benefits that, other than weight loss, that's giving them, um, that makes it a staying power for keto, right? Now it becomes a lifestyle. They're realizing, okay, it's no longer worth it for me to go back, because I'm seeing other benefits that,
yes,
I've never seen in any other diet. So that's from looking at it as a diet to now finally, looking at it as, okay, I can do this
yeah,
for a long period of time. So when someone fails from these short-term programs, maybe that they tried everything else and nothing's working, the question becomes, why is it working for these people and not me? I must be doing something wrong, and it must be me, and we blame ourselves of
mm,
what society has done. You've really done an amazing job on this book. What's really interesting to me is when you talk about discovering our true potential, that untapped potential that we can awaken anytime if we want to through this way of living. People who needs help are sometimes also those people who are incapable of seeing through their own health struggles, right? Because they may be um, addicted to sugar, but unknowingly addicted to sugar, because you
yeah,
have to have that self awareness
yeah,
and acceptance and honesty within yourself to recognize what is happening. Because you
yes,
could try all of these diets, or go into keto, and if you're not honest with yourself and you're not self-aware, you're not
yeah,
mindful of what you're eating, when your emotions aren't in place, it's just not gonna work for you, right? You talk about recognizing old habits, patterns of thinking to overcome these limits we put on ourselves. I want this for myself. I know people do too. How do we stop putting limitation on ourselves?
yes.
I'm getting into the mindset of this, and create this new version of ourselves.
Yeah, I love that question, Lorenz, because so many of us put limits on ourselves. You know, we when we start believing that the best of our years is behind us, it can really create a
Mhm.
depressive state. You know, people really lose that love of life and they just feel like, well, what's in front of me? You know, it's all behind me now. And
Mhm.
if we remove that mindset and actually think every single year I'm getting stronger and healthier and more vibrant, every decade I step into, I'm stepping into my best decade yet. And this mindset comes really from having that belief in your body, the confidence, the trust that what you're doing for your body is the best for your body. You know, eating well really does become a form of self respect. And so you make friends with your body and you start to believe that what you're doing will result in better energy and better sleep. And we don't place all the emphasis on how we look because looks are going to change as we age. Looks change, but what doesn't have to change is our energy levels. What doesn't have to change is our sleep. We can always improve on those key elements of our health, such as positivity, energy, mindset, sleeping habits, our lifestyle of being active active and finding new and curious things that excite us. So these are the things that if we start to focus more on and less on how we look, but more on how we're caring for our body and how our body will thank us in the long run for all these small changes that we make. I think the biggest thing for people when they're stuck in a place is understanding the why. The why creates curiosity. So why should I be interested in intermittent fasting, or why should I be interested in cutting out bread and toast and replacing it with a really empowering, healthy alternative? And when people understand the why and how incredible their bodies are, one of the things I love to do is help people fall in love with taking care of themselves. Because as they start to really be in awe of their own bodies and what their bodies are capable of, that's when they get really excited and think, yeah, I really want the best for my body, and I want to get that feeling of being energized and loving life and seeing life in full color again. And that happens.
You know, for me, it takes only the first step, because that's what I think of keto. That's how great keto is for me, is it only takes that first step. So then you realize that keto or this lifestyle brings so much.
Yes.
Other than just weight loss. You could have a goal of, losing 50 pounds, right? You could have a goal to, but most people find that it's much more than that. But my problem is the people find it for weight loss. It's other people that has other problems, example like MS or any other chronic illness.
Yes.
They're not finding keto because it's only known for weight loss by the general public.
Yeah,
right?
And I think that is starting. I think that's starting to change. It. People are recognizing the benefits of removing gluten, removing grains, healing the gut, and not necessarily just eating more fat, but adding in MCT or more coconut to increase your baseline ketone levels, so that you're getting better brain function, cognitive function, memory. So this is where, individuals in the space that I am in, where, we're trained in nutrition, we're trained in science, we can start to look at taking this concept of ketosis and this concept of healing the gut and the concept of stabilizing blood sugars and optimizing nutrients and absorption of nutrients for better health in the gut and the liver and all these different areas. And we can take this really big picture and start to bring it in to help people understand that it's not rocket science. It's not really difficult. If you stick to eating high quality protein, healthy fats, give your body some time fasting, eat within a certain window, eat your fermented foods to really focus on gut health, sleep well, walk, get outdoors, be in nature, breathe well, laugh, enjoy life, all the key things that make a big difference to our health. Then the focus comes off weight loss because that happens almost by default. And the focus becomes more on enjoying the process and enjoying the lifestyle that you've created for yourself.
I love that you started with, people saying my best years are behind me, right? Because that becomes an excuse. But before keto, we all thought that we are predisposed, determined to have diabetes because it's in our family.
Yes.
What do you say?
I would highly disagree with that. Our genes, yes, we do have some predisposition to certain genetic conditions and situations. However, our genes are influenced, switched on and off by the environment that those genes are exposed to. And food and lifestyle directly impact our genes. So genes can be the bullet in the gun, but they're not the trigger. The trigger is your lifestyle, your diet. So, we mustn't look to our genes and say, oh, it's just going to happen to me because it happened to my mum, my brother, my sister. We must look at, what can I do to safeguard my genes? What can I do to safeguard my health? And how can I really give my body the best chance to be the healthiest, strongest body it can be?
It's huge because if you're outside of keto space, that's the general knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
okay, it's in my family. I'm predisposed to do it. Then why do it, and why do it, right? Reversing chronic illness, and that you're huge on that. Insulin resistance. Um, just for people that doesn't fully understand it, I just want to like briefly like describe it. What is it? What does it mean when you have too much of that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Insulin resistance is a huge problem, Lorenz. I mean, it doesn't even, it's under recognized to the point where you can still get tested and it doesn't necessarily pick up that you have this insulin resistant state. Often it's when we start becoming symptomatic that we might go to a doctor or we might get our bloods taken, and there's, you know, this kind of pre-diabetic state that we're living in. Now, insulin resistance happens when, if we're chronic carb consumers, we're constantly spiking our blood sugars, you know, morning, mid-morning, lunchtime, mid-afternoon, evening meals, snacks at night. Our poor blood sugars are just constantly going up and down and up and down, and our pancreas is responding by producing insulin, and then the insulin's trying to usher that glucose out of the blood and into the cells. And at some point, the cells just start to say, oh my gosh, I'm not listening to you anymore. It's like they put their hands over their ears and say, no more, no more, no more. So they stop listening to the demands of insulin to bring the glucose in. And so the glucose levels start to creep up, and we get this insulin resistant state. And at that point, the body becomes it's not sensitive to eating something that might spike your blood sugar and then go down, because the body's able to mop up that blood sugar. Instead, we get this creeping up of the blood sugars, and we get this creeping up of insulin, and that starts to block our fat burning capabilities. Insulin is a fat storing hormone. So then we start laying down more body fat. That excess glucose also gets converted to body fat. So it just becomes this downward spiral. The other thing that happens is when you have high circulating blood sugars, it depletes your magnesium levels. And magnesium is a very important mineral for helping to usher the blood glucose into the cells. So the very thing that's helping insulin get the glucose out of the blood and into the cells starts to decline too. So it's just compounding that situation of higher blood sugars, higher insulin, and increased body fat storage.
What are the telltale signs of knowing that you are pre-diabetic?
Well, there's the classic insulin resistant state, which is a little different to if you suspect you might have diabetes, which is excessive thirst and urination.
Yeah.
There's that further down the line state. But the earlier state, where you're just in this insulin resistant state, would be more hungry all the time. You know, you're just grazing, you're constantly looking for food. You've eaten, and then an hour later, you're like, I need to eat more. You're never really satiated. Your blood sugars are very prone to dropping. You might get quite grumpy and irritable if you're not eating regularly. You might feel emotionally quite unstable. Brain fog is very classic because you're not getting the glucose into the brain, so the brain's just not working very sharply. So you get this insulin resistant state in your brain. And because the brain's not getting the fuel it wants, it's crying out all the time, give me more, give me more. So your body's telling you, I'm so hungry, and you become overfed but undernourished. So it's this very typical, constantly hungry, craving sweet things after you've eaten a meal. Blood sugars are going up and down all the time, and your emotional stability is very up and down. You're sort of highly strung. Weight gain is, you know, you look at a piece of cake and you gain weight, and you really struggle to lose weight. You tend to accumulate a lot of visceral and body fat and struggle, despite maybe exercising a lot or restricting your diet, you just struggle with body composition.
Now, let's say I was diagnosed by type 2 diabetes, and obviously I want to do this the natural way.
Yes.
what is the protocol and how do we reverse it so it doesn't become worse? Because people
Yeah.
think that you could, obviously, if you're diagnosed, you have to be on metformin to control
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
But how do we gradually reverse that illness?
Yes, it's a good question. And I would always say make sure you're working with your medical professional,
Mm.
your general practitioner or physician. But, you know, as I'm sure you're aware of Jason Fung's work, he
Hmm.
works extensively in this field in reversing type 2 diabetes and has shown time and time again how quickly it can be done as well. We're talking a matter of weeks. We
Mm.
can really improve our blood sugars and our insulin status through fasting for starters. You know, fasting is but again, just make sure you're doing this under supervision, but creating these windows of eating. And from that place, then you can start thinking about, well, what am I actually eating in that window? So, you know, it can be a step-by-step process. Just looking at what and when I'm eating is such an important factor
Mm.
for improving upon and then even reversing type 2 diabetes. And I've worked with so many people. In fact, one lady I worked with, her doctor actually called her at home and said, your results, your blood work is so unbelievable. How much has changed in the last 3 months? What are you doing? And
Mm.
she told him, you know, I've been through this program. I run a 4-week program called the Ultimate Health Program. She'd been through that program. She'd changed the way she looked at food. She changed her entire approach to eating,
Mm.
when and what. And, you know, her doctor was just amazed that
Mm.
the changes had been made. And, she, you know, her medication just came down, 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 down to the point where she's now off it.
She seems like to have the right mindset going into it,
Yes. Yeah.
following your program and being willing to, because that's a huge thing, right? Because now I have a friend and also my dad diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but whenever I mention keto or the way of eating, it's absurd to some people, let's just say.
Yes.
What's the mindset that you've seen time and time again that somebody has, that one has to have to be able to become successful in reversing this
Yeah.
illness?
That's a great question, because you're right. Actually, there is a very specific mindset around approaching reversing chronic illness. And I think sometimes people have heard for so many years, there's nothing that can be done. Take your medication. And it's really disempowering, Lorenz. You know, you're removing the power from the individual and you're placing all the power in medication or health professionals who are not necessarily seeing the body as having this innate intelligence to make change and reverse illness.
Mhm.
So I think when we start restoring the power to an individual, empowering them with information and knowledge and helping them shift their paradigm from being in a place of there's nothing I can do to, hey, actually, the choices I make on a daily basis really can make a big difference. And they need to be open minded to that. So, really shifting from that place of, listen, there's nothing I can do about it, to, hold on, let me understand a bit more. You're saying there is something I can do.
Mhm.
So, open mindedness, and then empowering them with knowledge and belief and confidence in their own body that there's so much that can be done.
Love that. I think open-mindedness is the first thing you have to
Yes.
come
Yes.
to be able to, because obviously you got to that point through your way of eating, because you must have done something wrong to come to this point, and coming to that acceptance. Again, you have to have the self-awareness, I
Yes.
think, to be able to do your own research,
Yeah.
some, because you have to find this way, right?
Yeah.
You have to, in the beginning, if you don't know anything about keto, you have to do your own research. But if you I'm not saying you can't be trusting your doctors. Of course, you have to be um following the advice
Yeah.
of your doctor as well. But I guess what I'm saying is, I guess you can jump into this
Yeah.
What should they, I know the mindset, the open-mindedness, but if
Lawrence, I
some
think it's really about being curious, about
Mhm,
being excited and curious about one of the most sophisticated and
mhm,
complex and amazing bodies on
mhm,
this planet. Our brains are incredibly sophisticated.
mhm,
Our bodies are just mind blowingly incredible. The more I learn about our bodies and the systems and the
mhm,
processes that go on and the intricacies, it's just, you can't help but be in awe of your own body. So
mhm,
I think having that open-mindedness, that curiosity, that excitement about,
mhm,
wow, what difference can I make? And this is part of my journey. Every day, every week, every month, every year, I want to learn more and understand more and figure out more how I can get to 120 and still be cognitively sharp and physically well and still learning even at that age. So I think once you start shifting the focus to seeing this as a curious journey and not having your ego in the way, be willing to take your ego aside and say, you know what, maybe I was wrong all those years and there is something I can do. And be willing to put your ego aside, be willing to put your
mhm,
preconceptions aside, have that open mind and be
mhm,
inspired. And I think this is where community is really important,
mhm,
is when you surround yourself with the right people, you become infected with their
mhm,
enthusiasm.
mhm.
You become inspired by their stories, by their journey, by what they're doing, and by their energy. And you think, you know what, I'd quite like a bit of that. And this is where having that community, I have a Facebook group, and my
Mhm.
Facebook group's called Healthy Keto Diet and Lifestyle for a reason, because it's not about just keto. It's about how we make it a healthy option.
Mm.
And then on Instagram, I have an Instagram account, Pauline Cox, and on there, I like to share little videos and Instagram lives with people that we can share stories and information. And the more people learn, and the more we surround ourselves with the right people that are also on this journey, the more we can just immerse ourselves into this new world and create that curiosity and that excitement.
Wow. Um, I want to be respectful of your time. If you have any interest in thriving, not just surviving, get her book. I guarantee. Primal, living in a modern world. If keep it simple. She had described the lifestyle in simple science, not overly complicated terms, so we could all understand it. Um, you can get it from her website, sewinarrow.com, Instagram Pauline J Cox, and YouTube Sew and Arrow. Love your table talks, by the way. I
Thank you,
enjoy
Joanne.
them.
Thank you.
This has been a blast. Thank you once again for coming on and sharing your story, Pauline. Um, Man, is there anything else that we've missed that you want to talk about?
No, I think we've covered a lot, Lorenzo. All I would say is if there's someone out there who hasn't started this journey yet and they really want to, just take it one
Mhm,
step at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. See this as a lifetime
mhm,
work. Don't see it as, oh, I need to do this in 4 weeks or the 4 week, get into a certain dress
mhm.
size plan. Forget
Yes.
that. See this as a journey. And you start your journey by just taking one step. And that one step might be, I'm just going to learn about carbs and be conscious of carbs. I'm going to ditch wheat and I'm going to find alternatives. Just take it one step at a time, and you'll be amazed how those one steps very quickly become bigger steps. And 6 months down the line, you're like, wow, a lot's changed in the last six
Mhm,
months.
mhm.
So, one step at a time.
I hope you guys are taking notes. Definitely learned a lot. I'm gonna re-listen to this. I'm gonna take my own notes as well, guys. Pauline, this has been a blast. Thank you once again. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Lorenz. Have a
Bye bye.
wonderful weekend. Take care.
Awesome.